Chapter 2, Civilization in Crisis, Section 3b. The poet, artist, and musician Leonard Cohen wrote the following words: "The blizzard of the world has crossed the threshold and has overturned the order of the soul." My mother often told us of how they would tie a tight rope from the back door of the house to the barn at the first sign of a blizzard, to act as a guide when a whiteout would hit. They'd had friends and neighbors who had wandered off and been frozen to death, having lost sight of home in a whiteout while still right in their own backyards. The Urantia book in paper 100, section 5, tells us these words: "The world is filled with lost souls, not lost in a theological sense, but lost in the directional meaning, wandering about in the confusion of the isms and cults of a frustrated philosophic era." We are investigating this transition to the next stage forward in the spiral of evolutionary development of consciousness, culture, and civilization, and this blizzard of complexity and confusion which has overturned so much of our world. To help us in our investigation, we're looking to this collection of 196 papers called the Urantia book, which hundreds of thousands of readers have reported is like my mother's life-saving guideline, here to safely show us the way home, the way of purpose, meaning, and direction for both the individual as well as our collective efforts to build a society that works for everyone. In so many ways, they tell us that the Urantia book is an operator's manual for planet Earth, with a real plan to get us across to the other side of this transitional interregnum and show us the way to building a rich, full life and an equally just society, based upon the shared values that our civilization was built upon, the ideals of creating harmony out of chaos, beauty out of the still unseen potentials of nature, truth out of the new meanings and the new discoveries, and goodness out of the lived values of age upon age of trial and error experience. Some call this next period in our development the New Enlightenment. Some the Second Axial Age. The Urantia book calls this the New Renaissance. This is a Urantia book for dummies, Chapter 2, Civilization in Crisis, Section 3b, The Solutions, continued. So here in this section we are continuing with our investigation from Section 3a into the diagnosis of this imbalance brought on by this blizzard of the world and what it has done to the order of the soul during this interval of our civilizational development called the Interregnum of wisdom. This pause right here in our spiral of evolutionary development between where we are and where we need to get to in order to progress. The New Renaissance, the next step forward in birthing a healthy and vibrant civilization that works for everyone. We are looking into the Urantia book as a tight guide rope, a pathway through this period of uncertainty. In our last section, Section 3a, we have been working on this quote in the Urantia book from paper 118. "When culture advances too fast, when material achievement outruns the evolution of wisdom, then does civilization contain within itself the seeds of retrogression, a break to slow us down. But unless buttressed by the swift augmentation of experiential wisdom, such human societies will recede from high but premature levels of attainment, and the dark ages of the interregnum of wisdom will bear witness to the inexorable restoration of that balance between self-liberty and self-control. Now, we can easily see that our material achievements have definitely outrun the evolution of wisdom. Paper 81 tells us society is the offspring of age upon age of trial and error. It is what survived the selective adjustments and readjustments in the successive stages of mankind's age-long rise from animal to human levels of planetary status. The great danger to any civilization at any one moment is the threat of breakdown during the time of transition from the established methods of the past to those new and better but untried procedures of the future. Transition is always accompanied by confusion. But here's the good news. Confusion goes before growth as well as before destruction. Urantia is now quivering on the very brink of one of the most amazing and enthralling periods of social readjustment, moral quickening, and spiritual enlightenment. Quivering on the brink. That means capable of going one way or the other, like a tightrope walker. It's a fine balancing act to bring all of the elements of such a complex planet together in a non-violent evolutionary manner. The papers tell us that civilization is a choice. We need to provide the favorable conditions for growth and to understand that to stall, to stay in this interregnum too long, is to decay. Paper 71 tells us this: economics, society, and government must evolve if they are to remain. Static conditions on an evolutionary world are indicative of decay. Only those institutions which move forward with the evolutionary stream persist. But this is also true for the individual. Static conditions of growth will cause decay. We need to provide the favorable conditions for our own growth. Putting the controversy of politics aside, we'll take care of that in Section 5 under Leadership, Politics, and Power. There is more important work of character growth. Again, the Urantia papers tell us this. Even secular education could help in this great spiritual renaissance if it would pay more attention to the work of teaching youth how to engage in life planning and character progression. The purpose of all education should be to foster and further the supreme purposes of life, the development of a majestic and well-balanced personality. We are also told that there is a right way to do this. There is a right and proper way to do a thing in the face of any potential alternative. All we need to do is to find that way in our own reflective thought stream as it pours forth from our soul to our conscious awareness. But we keep getting in our own way. In paper 130, it tells us this: the will of man is the way of man, and I think they mean all people. The sum and substance of that which the mortal chooses to be and do. Will is the deliberate choice of a self-conscious being which leads to decision conduct based on intelligent reflection. Civilization is a deliberate choice, a matter of will. Now, certainly political will, economic will, but more important than these is the will of the citizen. The word civilization comes from the word citizen. In paper 76, it says this: it is the people who make a civilization. Civilization does not make the people. Paper 99, the attainment of a high cultural civilization demands first the ideal type of citizen, and then ideal and adequate social mechanisms wherewith such a citizenry can control the economic and political institutions of such an advanced human society. So it is the quality of the citizen, the personal growth of each citizen, that we must look to first. And here's where we run into the crisis of the individual. the subject of this section. The papers tell us this: successful living is nothing more or less than the art of the mastery of dependable techniques for solving common problems. We call this a philosophy for living, which is just a fancy way of saying attitude or your worldview. The first step in the solution of any problem is to locate the difficulty, to isolate the problem, and frankly, to recognize its nature and gravity. The great mistake is that when life problems excite our profound fears, we refuse to recognize them. Likewise, when the acknowledgement of our difficulties entails the reduction of long-cherished conceit, the admission of envy, or the abandonment of deep-seated prejudice, the average person prefers to cling to the old illusions of safety and to the long-cherished false beliefs of security. We humans are very good at creating a personal worldview that is filled with what the Urantia book calls our own preconceived opinions, settled ideas, and long-standing prejudices. We all have them. But in paper 160, it tells us this: only a brave person is willing honestly to admit and fearlessly to face what a sincere and logical mind discovers. We need to tell ourselves the truth about what is really going on, not as some conspiracy outside of ourselves whereby we play the fault-blame game over and over and over again, but what is really going on inside our own self. To honestly admit and fearlessly face what a sincere and logical mind discovers. Henry David Thoreau, in one of his less romantic moods, famously stated, "The mass of humanity lead lives of quiet desperation, and go to the grave with their song still in them." This could also be the definition of anomie. And what is the cause of this quiet desperation? Thoreau tells us that misplaced values are the cause. We feel a void in our lives and we attempt to fill it with things like money, possessions, awards, accolades. We think these things will make us happy, and when we find out that they don't, we just keep seeking more of them anyway. And so we spend the minutiae of our lives moving around the planet searching for more and more of the same old, and not finding what we're really hungry for. Thoreau argues that the values we attach to possessions and status is misplaced. They are not the key to happiness, and they may in fact hurt more than they help. Some call this shopping therapy. Thoreau's basically right. Misplaced values contribute to the quiet desperation. But it's not the end of the story. What is missing is resignation. We lead lives of quiet desperation when we resign ourselves to dissatisfaction. Quiet desperation is the acceptance of and surrendering to the circumstances of our life. Quietly desperate lives are frustrated, passive, and apathetic. They're unfulfilled and unrealized. Often we feel like we are standing on the sidelines watching the game of life unfold before us, and we're not in it. Spectators rather than participants. Thoreau believed that within each of us is something greater, waiting to be discovered. But we have this unfortunate tendency to suppress those inner longings for some expectation that society holds as the truth of reality. And so our own personal experiences, must be mistaken. It's not easy to function outside of the expectations that society puts on us, especially when we see the value system breaking down, and we know that it is the glue that holds everything together. The path from where we are, both as an individual and as a civilization, to where we need to get to, is not an easy one to walk. It requires discrimination, determination, and a great deal of balance. The path to the next stage of development requires balance, purpose, and ability to understand your destiny. These are the same elements that the tightrope walker must have in order to maneuver from his place of origin to his destination. The tightrope walker is one of the great metaphors for our journey through life. So it's useful to demonstrate the importance of balance here in this section. The act of tightrope walking is called funambulism. But on the pathway to life, sometimes it isn't so much fun. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche used the metaphor of a tightrope walker walking between chaos and stagnation over an abyss as a metaphor for humanity in the process of transforming from the current stage of human consciousness to a more advanced stage. The Obermensch is what he called it, which means the overman or higher self, sometimes translated as the Superman or just Superman, which the Urantia book calls the superconscious human being. This symbol of the Obermensch points us to Nietzsche's notion of wholeness, what the Urantia book refers to as self-mastery, self-control, what we often refer to as self-actualization, self-overcoming, the prerequisites to wholeness, and the characteristics of the superconscious overman. The tightrope is a good analogy of quivering on the very brink, a dangerous thing. The object of the metaphor is to demonstrate the need to avoid either of two opposite bad situations, which seems to be the story of our lives. And so it requires both incredible balance and faith in the apparatus and an incredible focus on purpose to walk this tightrope of our life and to get across to the other side of building a life and building a society, attempting to bring harmony out of chaos, beauty out of potentials, truth out of meanings, and goodness out of values. Nietzsche has this character of his go on named Zarathustra. He says, Zarathustra looked at the people and wondered, and then he spoke thus: Man is a tightrope walker on a rope stretched between the animal and the Superman, walking on a rope over an abyss, a dangerous crossing, a dangerous wayfaring, a dangerous looking back, a dangerous trembling and halting. And Zarathustra spoke thus to the people: I teach you the overman. Man is something that shall be overcome. He went on, all beings have created something beyond themselves, a great wave of civilization crashing forward in an ever-progressing flow of evolution. And so Zarathustra asks, do you want to be the ebb of this great flood and even go back to the beasts rather than overcome the present state of affairs and evolve into the overman? He says, what is the ape to man but an amusement? And today's man shall be just that for the overman, an amusement, but a kinder, gentler form of amusement, one of admiration and compassion for the incredible courage and challenges their ancestors, who are us, the people who faced the challenges of their world and brought them, the overman, into existence. Here, Nietzsche metaphorically introduces the tightrope walker as the connection between the fear-based animal nature of humans and the superconscious overman, or higher man, walking the journey of evolution from the animal to the human, from the human to the overman, on a tightrope walk to our destiny. He says, what is great about human beings is that they are a bridge and not a purpose. What is lovable about human beings is that they are crossing over and going under, hand over hand if necessary, whatever it takes to progress, to pull us out of the state of anomie and interregnum and get on with evolving our life and our civilization. We are not the finished product of evolution. Humans act mostly as a sort of bridge between animal instinct and our superior self. Zarathustra argues that humans must evolve by looking inward and severing the primal animal urges that keep us down. For this, he uses the parable of the tightrope walker who is making this dangerous journey between both spheres of existence, from the immature animal mind to the perfecting superconscious mind of the mature individual building a mature society, the Superman. Nietzsche is telling us that we are unfinished animals, walking our tightrope of life between our animal origin, sometimes called our lower self, which we all know quite well, and our destiny, or our higher self, which we also know but maybe not quite as well. This is Nietzsche's Overman, the superhuman future of the human species. But what is it that separates this higher self from the lower self? Here, the Urantia book is incredible in its explanation. It fully and completely tells us how we got to where we are. In paper 160, section 1, we read this: Animals respond nobly to the urge of life, but only man can attain the art of living, albeit the majority of mankind only experience the animal urge to live. Animals know only this blind and instinctive urge. Man is capable of transcending this urge to natural function. Man may elect to live upon the high plane of intelligent art, even of celestial joy and spiritual ecstasy. Animals make no inquiry into the purposes of life. Therefore, they never worry. Neither do they commit suicide. Suicide among men testifies that such beings have emerged from the purely animal stage of existence, and to the further fact that the exploratory efforts of such human beings have failed to attain the artistic levels of mortal experience. Animals know not the meaning of life. Man not only possesses capacity for the recognition of values and the comprehension of meanings, but he also is conscious of the meaning of meanings. He is self-conscious of insight. We let our animal origin, fear-based imagination run away with us, instead of allowing us to focus on the immediate task of restoring balance within the human heart and the human mind energy system. Worry is just a negative imagination. 90% of the things we worry about never happen. What we see in this metaphor of the tightrope walker is the maturing process, both of the individual and humanity as a whole. As we move forward in this narrow path towards our destiny, we are moving to the next stage of our life cycle as an individual, and at the social level, another stage of our civilizational development, as we have been explaining throughout these sections of Chapter 2 with the spiral of evolutionary development. Only a brave person is willing, honestly, to admit and fearlessly to face what a sincere and logical mind discovers. So, let's expand on this metaphor and see if it can help us see what the Urantia book has to tell us on this subject. The three most important elements to the tightrope walker are this. First, balance. If you don't have balance, you wouldn't even get on the rope. Second, what is the rope made of, and what condition is it in? And third, how strong and secure are the anchor points? His very survival depends on the quality of these elements of his reality. So, let's begin with balance, because the process of seeking equilibrium as we move through this interregnum is the essence of civilization, as we seek certainty, safety, and security. Balance is also fundamental to the individual in order to function in society. and for society to function at all. We are most acutely aware of balance when we lose it, when we don't have it, when we are knocked off balance. And today we see this everywhere in our world. The whole world system is out of balance, and so many are in a state of being humanly dislocated. And this is the state of anomie, as we discussed in our last section. In order to maintain balance, the tightrope walker uses a long balancing pole, like this one. So in this metaphor, this balancing pole represents your worldview, your opinion of how the world works, which usually develops around the time we leave our parents' home and strike out on our own. The balance pole provides several advantages to the tightrope walker and to us because it distributes mass away from the pivot point, which helps withstand external sources of torque like sudden gusts of wind, which are the storms of our life. Your worldview is your center of gravity. Balance is an art. It takes practice. Remember learning to ride a bike? We didn't get it right off the bat, did we? Equilibrium in the human mind system is the art of balancing your center of gravity, your inner world with your outer world. The Urantia book calls this the art of living, developing a living philosophy for living, a decision-making system that helps us to move forward on the tightrope and find peace and confidence and build a worldview that supports your walk along the tightrope of life. For the purposes of our demonstration, let's place things of the outer reality on one end of the equilibrium pole and elements of the inner reality on the opposite end. We can immediately see that in order to keep our balance on the tightrope of life, we need to keep our inner reality balanced with our outer world of our sensory material reality. A task that is proven over and over again to be so difficult for we mere humans. In paper 111, the Urantia book tells us the advances of true civilization are all born in this inner world of mankind. It is only the inner life that is truly creative. Civilization can hardly progress when the majority of youth of any generation devote their interests and energies to the materialistic pursuits of the sensory or outer world. It goes on. The inner and the outer worlds have a different set of values. Any civilization is in jeopardy when 3/4 of its youth enter materialistic professions and devote themselves to the pursuit of sensory activities of the outer world. Civilization is in danger when youth neglect to interest themselves in ethics, sociology, genetics, philosophy, the fine arts, religion, and cosmology. Ideas may take origin in the stimulus of the outer world, but ideals are born in the creative realms of the inner world. Today, the nations of the world are directed by men who have a superabundance of ideas, but they are poverty-stricken in ideals. That is the explanation of poverty, divorce, war, and racial hatreds. The things that lead us astray and get us into the most trouble are often just short-term pleasures. Lust. Lust. We love lust. Greed. Witness the 2008 financial meltdown. Vanity. Remember that song, You're So Vain? I thought she was singing about me. Gluttony, right? Yum yum. We love our gluttony. But over time, we find less and less satisfaction in these, and eventually we learn that essentially life is a moral drama, not a hedonistic one. It is the things we call character that endure over the long term. Courage, honesty, altruism, humility. People with character are capable of a long endurance on the tightrope amid the storms of life. They thrive on problem solving. And as we saw in Section 2 of this same chapter, it's the problematic life conditions of evolution that have moved us forward ever since the dawn of the human adventure, what we are calling complexification. We are being groomed as problem solvers. Character people are constantly moving forward, constantly staying attached to other people and important causes and callings, through thick and thin, the salt of the earth, as we say. As we play the part or the role that's assigned to us, we learn to see that no external conflict is as consequential or as dramatic as the inner campaign against our own shortcomings, what Nietzsche calls our overcoming. Character is built in the course of our inner confrontation with the outer urges, desires, and lures that pull us off the tightrope and into the fall, the abyss of despair, depression, fear, worry, anxiety. In his book, The Road to Character, David Brooks, a well-known columnist for the New York Times, wrote about this struggle between the inner and the outer realms of consciousness. He wrote, "Recently I have been thinking about the differences between the resume virtues and the eulogy virtues. The resume virtues are the ones you list on your resume, the skills that you brought to the job market and that contribute to external success. The eulogy virtues are deeper. They're the virtues that get talked about at your funeral, the ones that exist at the core of your being. Whether you're kind, brave, honest, or faithful, what kind of relationships you've formed." He goes on, "Most of us would say that the eulogy virtues are more important than the resume virtues. But I confess," he says, "for long stretches of my life, I have been spending more time thinking about the resume than the eulogy virtues." He writes, "Our educational system is certainly orientated around the resume virtues more than the eulogy virtues. Public conversation is too. The self-help tips in magazines, the nonfiction bestsellers. Most of us have a clearer strategy for how to achieve career success than we do for how to develop a profound character and cultivate peace of mind." In paper 195, the Urantia book tells us, "Even secular education could help in this great spiritual renaissance if it would pay more attention to the work of teaching youth how to engage in life planning and character progression. The purpose of all education should be to foster and further the supreme purpose of life, the development of a majestic and well-balanced personality. There's a great need for the teaching of moral discipline in the place of so much self-gratification." Responding to what he calls the culture of Big Me, which emphasizes external success, Brooks challenges us to rebalance the scales between our resume virtues, achieving wealth, fame, and status, and our eulogy virtues, those that exist at the core of our being, kindness, bravery, honesty again, and faithfulness, focusing on what kind of relationships we have formed and on the deeper values that should inform our life and provide us an opportunity to rethink our priorities and strive to build rich inner lives marked by humility and moral depth. With that, to become a better person, a better family member, a better citizen, and to make a better contribution to the world we live in that is now in danger, quivering on the brink, and needs our help. I think David Brooks hit the nail on the head. Here in paper 160, we can read, "Human life consists of three great drives: urges, desires, and lures. Strong character, commanding personality, is only acquired by converting the natural urge of life into the social art of living by transforming present desires into those higher longings which are capable of lasting attainment, while the commonplace lure of existence must be transferred from one's conventional and established ideas to the higher realms of unexplored ideas and undiscovered ideals. The more complex civilization becomes, the more difficult will become the art of living. The more rapid the changes in social usage, the more complicated will become the task of character development. It tells us every 10 generations mankind must learn anew the art of living if progress is to continue. And here's where it gets interesting. And if man becomes so ingenious that he more rapidly adds to the complexities of society, like now, the art of living will need to be remastered in less time, perhaps every single generation. If the evolution of the art of living fails to keep pace with the technique of existence, humanity will quickly revert to the simple urge of living, the attainment of satisfaction of present desires. Thus will humanity remain immature. Society will fail in growing up to full maturity. And that is where we are right now, in an immature state of development known as the Interregnum. And so we can see that your mind energy system is your center of gravity, and it is all about mind. From this mind energy system emerges our worldview, our balancing mechanism. And that's what we bring as citizens to the civilization. Paper 196 says, man's greatest adventure in the flesh consists in a well-balanced and sane effort to advance the borders of self-consciousness, to understand ourselves better, out through the dim realities of the embryonic soul consciousness, to a wholehearted effort to reach the borderland of spirit consciousness. To understand this better, we need to investigate what the word reality means and how it applies to our tightrope walker through the storms of life and our human adventure. In paper 196, it tells us that there are just 3 elements in universe reality: fact, idea, and relation. It goes on, it says, we are in the habit of designating these realities as thing, meaning, and value. Everything you know is contained in one of these 3 elements of universe reality: thing, meaning, and values. And the Urantia book tells us that this is just the very beginning of an understanding of reality, that there are ever ascending levels of reality. And it makes very clear that there are limits to our understanding of these higher levels. However, we will accelerate this topic many, many times throughout this series. Our intuitive sense in the mind arena of living tells us that we have come to understand this triad of reality, this thing, meaning, and value, as fact, idea, and ideal. The Urantia book tells us only the comprehension of facts and the wise manipulation within the laws of nature will enable man to get what he wants and to avoid what he does not want. Scientific knowledge leading to scientific action is the only antidote for so-called accidental ills. The expansion of material knowledge permits a greater intellectual appreciation of the meanings of ideas and the values of ideals. A human being can find truth in his inner experience, but he needs a clear knowledge of facts to apply his personal discovery of truth to the ruthlessly practical demands of everyday life. So from our discoveries, and as we ascend to another level, we see that fact, idea, ideals, leads to the understanding of matter, mind, and a word that the Urantia book tells us isn't a very good word, but they use it anyway, spirit. Usually that means kind of ghosty things. But the Urantia book explains in full detail the whole physics of spirit and how important it is that we understand this. In paper 118, it reads, "In the beginning on an evolutionary world, the natural occurrences of the material order and the personal desires of human beings often appear to be antagonistic. Much that takes place on an evolving world is rather hard for mortal man to understand. Natural law is so often apparently cruel, heartless, and indifferent to all that is true, beautiful, and good in human comprehension. But as humanity progresses in planetary development, we observe that this viewpoint is modified by the following factors. Humanity's augmenting vision as we grow and mature, his increasing understanding of the world in which he lives, his enlarging capacity for the comprehension of the material facts of time, the meaningful ideas of thought, and the valuable ideals of spiritual insight. As long as men measure only by the yardstick of things of a physical nature, they can never hope to find unity in time and space. In the last 300 years, we have tried to build a civilization without a genuine understanding of the spiritual dimension, and it has failed. We have thrown the living spiritual baby out with the proverbial dogmatic and doctrinal bathwater, and it is dying. In paper 103, it reads, "When man approaches the study and examination of his universe from the outside, he brings into being the various physical sciences. When he approaches the research of himself and the universe from the inside, he gives origin to theology and metaphysics. The later art of philosophy develops in an effort to harmonize the many discrepancies which are destined at first to appear between the findings and the teachings of these two diametrically opposed avenues of approaching the universe of things and beings." Continuing in paper 103, the spiritual viewpoint is the awareness of the insideness of human experience. Man's spiritual nature affords him the opportunity of turning the universe outside in. It is therefore true that, viewed exclusively from the insideness of personality experience, all creation appears to be spiritual in nature. And we see this in so many of the philosophies. However, when man analytically inspects the universe through the material elements of his physical senses and associated mind perception, as we do now, the cosmos appears to be mechanical and energy material, matter. Such a technique of studying reality consists in turning the universe inside out. Okay. A logical and consistent philosophical concept of the universe cannot be built upon the postulates of either materialism or spiritism, for both of these systems of thinking, when universally applied, are compelled to view the cosmos in distortion. The former, contacting with a universe turned inside out, the latter, realizing the nature of the universe turned outside in. Never then can either science or religion, in and of themselves, standing alone, hope to gain an adequate understanding of universal truths and relationships, without the guidance of human philosophy and the illumination of divine revelation. Always must man's inner spirit depend for its expression and self-realization upon the mechanism and the technique of the mind. Likewise, must man's outer experience of material reality be predicated on the mind consciousness of the experiencing personality. Therefore are the spiritual and the material, the inner and the outer, human experiences always correlated with the mind function and conditioned as to their conscious realization by the mind activity. Mind is a bridge between things and values, between matter and spirit. Man experiences matter in his mind. He experiences spiritual reality in the soul, but becomes conscious of this experience in his mind. The intellect is a harmonizer, an ever-present conditioner and qualifier of the sum total of mortal experience. Both energy things and spirit values are colored by their interpretation through the mind media of consciousness. So how do we do all that? Paper 196 tells us, the great challenge to modern man is to achieve a better communication with the divine spirit that dwells within the human mind. Providence becomes increasingly discernible as men and women reach upward from the material to the spiritual. The attainment of completed spiritual insight enables the ascending personality to detect harmony in what was theretofore chaos. There is operative throughout all time and space in regard to all reality of whatever nature an inexorable and impersonal law which is equivalent to the function of a cosmic providence. What man calls providence is all too often the product of his own imagination, the fortuitous juxtaposition of the circumstances of chance. There is, however, a real and emerging providence in the finite realm of universe existence, a true and actualizing correlation of the energies of space, the motions of time, the thoughts of intellect, the ideals of character, the desires of spiritual natures, and the purposive, volitional acts of evolving personalities. Us. There is a providence in the evolving universes, and it can be discovered by creatures like you and I to just the extent that we have attained capacity to perceive the purpose of the evolving universe. We are incomplete beings moving towards completion and wholeness on our tightrope of this human adventure in the whole of the cosmos. When men pray for providential intervention in the circumstances of life, many times the answer to their prayer is their own changed attitudes toward life. But providence is not whimsical, neither is it fantastic nor magical. It is the slow and sure emergence of the mighty sovereign of the finite universes. We have often heard people say, "I will believe it when I see it." But with the spiritual law, you will see it when you believe it. An effective philosophy of living is formed by a combination of cosmic insight and the total of one's emotional reactions to the social and economic environment. Remember, while inherited urges cannot be fundamentally modified, emotional responses to such urges can be changed. Therefore, the moral nature can be modified. Character can be improved. In the strong character, emotional responses are integrated and coordinated, and thus is produced a unified personality. What we learn is that self-esteem comes from self-respect. Self-respect comes from choosing this developing character, from choosing the path of character development, the moral path, the right and proper way to do a thing, in the face of every alternative. Paper 71 says, a moral society should aim to preserve the self-respect of its citizenry and afford every normal individual adequate opportunity for self-realization. Such a plan of social achievement would yield a cultural society of the highest order. There is no doubt whatsoever that this is a fateful moment in history. Wherever we look, politically, religiously, economically, environmentally, there is insecurity and instability. It's not too much to say that the future of the West and the unique form of freedom it has pioneered for the past 4 centuries is altogether at risk. There's a great deal of cultural ammunition in the marketplace of ideas which reports that this civilization, confusion, and turmoil is all related somehow to the end times, an Armageddon or an apocalypse. Current literature and many films and movies have promoted these ideas ad nauseum. The Urantia book does not support these ideas, and to demonstrate this, I would like to share with you a parable that is based upon actual events. In your mind's eye, imagine this if you would. Let us go back in time, back to 430 AD, Carthage, North Africa. Hot, dry, dusty, Mediterranean, and Roman. A young man stands on the shore of the Mediterranean Sea, looking out towards the horizon. He is a Roman. This is a Roman world. He was born into a Roman world, played in a Roman world, was educated in a Roman world. He anticipated being married in a Roman world, bringing children into a Roman world, educating them in a Roman world, and, in all probability, die in a Roman world, with a Roman burial. Above all, he was a Roman. But rumors abound. Rome has fallen, sacked, burned to the ground by the barbarians. As the young man stands by the sea, he sees the ships of doom and destruction sailing in his direction, coming to lay waste his land, his home, his family. In his fear and panic, he turns and starts to run. He runs for 2 days, resting only when he can no longer carry on, running through the North African solitude to the city of Hippo, the home of his teacher, the master teacher Augustine. As he nears the city, he sees the smoke and the flames, and he knows that he is too late. He begins searching for his teacher through the throngs of the people leaving the burning city, and upon finding him, he falls on his knees at the master's feet. Crying, wailing, and with tears streaming off his chin, he cries out to the old philosopher, "Master, Master, is this the end of the world? Is this the Armageddon you told us about? Will this be the end of us and our world?" The master, singed and stinging from his own wounds, picks up the boy, and looking him straight in the eyes, says to him, "Fear not, my son. You do not have anything to be afraid of." Then, with a knowing in his eyes, he spoke to the very soul of the lad, saying, my boy, this is not the end of the world. Worlds do not end. Human systems change. You have nothing to fear, because walking in the streets of the cities of man are the builders of the cities of God. Today, we too stand on the shores of the sea of humanity, looking outward towards our horizon. And we too see the ships of doom and destruction coming to lay waste our civilization. The ships of medical pandemic, the ships of economic collapse, the ships of greed and selfishness, the ships of religious and civil warfare, and of terrorism. And many too cry out, "Is this the end of the world? Is this the Armageddon our prophets of today speak of? Is this the end of our civilization as we know it?" And in response, I reiterate the words of the master teacher Augustine, "Worlds do not end. Human systems change. And you have nothing to fear, because walking in the streets of the cities of man are you, the builders of the cities of God. You are the one. You are the one that we have been waiting for. This is not the end of something. This is the beginning of something. Something bigger than anything we have ever imagined in the history of the human race. Certainly, we are facing our greatest challenge. The blizzard of the world has crossed the threshold, and it has overturned the order of the soul. But the 196 papers of the Urantia book make it forever certain that materialistic determinators are not the exclusive law of the cosmos. Materialism is there, but it is not exclusive. Mechanism is there, but it is not unqualified. Determinism is there, but it is not alone, because we are not alone. There is a spirit within you that is the reality of your own personal experience. In paper 102, the Urantia book says, "Man very early becomes conscious that he is not alone in the world or the universe. There develops a natural, spontaneous self-consciousness of other-mindedness in the environment of selfhood." We have seen this in all the wisdom traditions of our ancestors. Faith translates this natural experience into the spiritual recognition of God, as you understand it. But God is the reality, the source, nature, and destiny of other-mindedness. But such a knowledge of God is ever and always a reality of personal experience, not dogmas and doctrines. If God were not a personality, he could not become a living part of the real spiritual experience of a human personality. We are facing our greatest opportunity, the opportunity to build a new civilization and to know that we are not alone, that we have help, cosmic help, and this should imbibe us with a sense of destiny and enthusiasm never before seen on our planet. The work is ours. The consequence is God's. The cities are ours. The result will be the Supremes, one step closer to the age of light and life. It is our only course of action. The old is breaking down, but the new is breaking through. Today, our task is to integrate these great cosmic intuitions of our cosmic mind into a unified philosophy, a worldview that will strengthen the fabric of goodwill in the world. To bring in the new day of our human well-being is our spiritual birthright. We need a deeper sense of reality, based and including spiritual values, and a new perception of humanity as a unit of divine life within an ordered and purposive universe. Humanity is not a haphazard or uncharted course. There is a plan. This plan has always existed and is part of the greater design of the cosmos. The plan has worked out through the evolutionary developments of the past, and because of the special impetus giving it from time to time by the great leaders, teachers, and people of goodwill of the human race, it has moved us forward and moved us forward and moved us forward. But it is not magic. The real magic is taking the first consciously reflective animals to emerge on the planet, split them into 7 or 8 races of humanity, and then get them to create ways to live together. First in society, then in tribes, then nations, and now to a whole and complete planetary civilization. This is the real magic of the universe. To turn animals into Superman. Nietzsche's Superman. From About World Goodwill. Goodwill is one of the most basic spiritual qualities of the human being, and the great untapped resource at the heart of every human community. Isn't that the truth? People of goodwill are those who think and act with a measure of loving understanding and a concern for the well-being of all. The energy of goodwill is potential and a powerful force for social change. Yet its power remains largely unrecognized and certainly underutilized. This is the spirit within you, and it fosters an understanding of this energy and the role it is playing within you and with you in the development of a new humanity. This is the way that the universe works through you. It is the reflective, thoughtful, planned action of networks of goodwill that is driving the response to all the problems of our age, from poverty, poisoned race relations, and environmental destruction, through to despair in thinking about the future and the crisis of materialism and selfishness. People of goodwill from all cultures, faiths, and professions are creating through their words and actions a new world where sharing, cooperation, and right relations are taking root and spreading. Never before in the history of the planet has goodwill been so active. The diversity and variety of people of goodwill means that we can never be organized in one unitary movement or network. Every community has its people of goodwill. It is based upon truth, beauty, goodness, and love. It is this basic human expressions that are driving the momentum of change, challenging all the habits of culture, consciousness, thinking, and actions of the past. Recognition of the sheer abundance of goodwill in action as it exists today, and the countless movements drawing on the energy of goodwill, changes the way we see what is happening in the world. It is empowering, and it gives us grounds upon which hope and faith in the future can grow. Truly, goodwill has the potential to become the keynote of the new civilization of wholeness. Paper 195, the Urantia book says, your planet is now quivering on the very brink of one of the most amazing and enthralling epochs of social readjustment, moral quickening, and spiritual enlightenment. This is a new renaissance. And we can only do this one person at a time. And right now, that person is you. We are on the road to find out. And the Urantia book, the guide rope of wisdom, is a good book to show us the plan. So pick one up and begin to spread the goodwill of truth, beauty, and goodness. And join us in Section 4 as we investigate what the ROPE really is. That element that the tightrope walker uses to support himself in this life journey, and how this relates to you and your journey on the road to find out more about reality. And so please, click the subscribe button and we will notify you when the next episode is up. And thank you. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me and with you.